Love being a priest. I was watching this beautiful lady today trying to figure out, who is this lady? Because she looks so familiar. I even asked my friend, who's the lady with the burgundy on? Me and Sister Minnie was dancing together how many years ago when you took Crystal back home? I brought Carson and she brought Crystal. And we changed the world, and people don't understand the power of that moment on today. We took a body from Jamaica and a body from America, and we got a Ghana government to accept them and give them a full state funeral that lasted for 1 week, like nothing they ever seen. And what they were doing, they were symbolically, under Jerry Rollins' leadership, welcoming all of you back home.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so Crystal and Carson was the symbol of your spiritual return.
Right, right.
So we don't have to keep doing that over and over again. Many led the mission that did it already. Now what does that mean? If I'm God having a human experience, and he says, Small, you're going to die. No, I'm going to dissolve. I'm going to break down into those thousands of components that make me up. But I have already deposited myself as myself 8 times. And they have deposited themselves, which is myself, 22 times. I have 8 children and 22 grand. And I know when those 22 get busy, I'm going to get deposited many more times. Do you understand that? Okay. That's called African theology. That's the way our spirituality works. Somebody's got us confused and thinking there's a mystery God that you can't see, you can't touch, you can't do nothing to. So if you pray to him all day and all night, something better would happen. But he must be deaf when black folks make prayers. Because ain't nothing working. Nowhere in the world is God listening to us in the methods we are using today. Not in Africa, not in America, and not in the Caribbean. We are still being ruled by 1/9 of the world population. The Europeans are 1/9 of the world population. And he's at minus birth rate, meaning more of his people are dying naturally than he can give natural birth to. So that's why he's got all the technical, artificial way of giving birth. And that's why he wants you to have abortion so he can slow your growth down. But we don't understand. Because we have the wrong, the scholars like to use the term paradigm. I know y'all heard them kick the word around. I don't like to use those big words. But this paradigm thing has been kicked around a lot lately. And you know what it means, the paradigm? It talks about the sets of ideas you have that allow you to make decisions for your future. The key is, where did you get your ideas? See, your intent may be good, but all intent has content. So you may have a good intention, but if your content is constructed and formed by your enemies, then your intent is an act of an enemy. Do you understand that? But that's important. It means that you're your own worst enemy without even knowing that you are. So come back to spirituality and let me soften that a little bit. Because I know people like to hear of Shango and Oya and Ogun when we talk about our tradition. Now, I have a head, or what they call a consciousness that's trained in Shango. And I have a consciousness that's trained in Ogun. And I have one that's trained in Babuluaye or Shakpan. Those are simply bodies of knowledge that Africans have learned from nature. So this Shango, and I got a shrine down in Trinidad. I'm a good dancing Shango Baptist. And I've been in the mountains here and danced Nyabingi at every church up there in 92. So I'm clear that we have the ritual down, but I'm not clear that we have the idea down on why are we doing these rituals. What is the ideas? Because the idea we have now don't allow us to run the government in Jamaica. Look at you. You tell me, we've got enough people in here now to determine who the prime minister is going to be. So how come we end up getting a prime minister that don't agree with me? Because we're not using our spirituality and understanding that it is our reality. Your reality is formed by your understanding of what allows you to provide for your wife, your children, or your husband and yourself food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security. You cannot separate that from your spirituality. And in order to provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security, you must control economic, politics, and culture. And you cannot control that if you're not involved in the government. You're not going to control that. It sounds good, 10 of us saying we are this or we are that. 10 of us singing and dancing African songs. But if we don't get involved in the government that runs this enterprise, you ain't free and you're not even significant. Let me say it again. You're not free and you're not significant. Because you can't control the economic, politics, and culture which produces the food, shelter, safety, and security for you and your family. Spirituality says you must be in command of your reality. So if I was to tell you a story about Shango, and some of you know Shango as the god of lightning and the great king. Well, if I was to teach my theology, I would tell you that Shango is a concept in the human mind. It is a set of principles that Africans develop, and they call it Shango because it's symbolic of the strength of a king, and it seems to have the power of lightning. Shango, in the simplest form, means the courage within any human being to change themselves into a better human being and a higher spiritual being. So once Shango, that lightning hit, that fire, that power, that courage, then you must marry, as Shango, you must marry the beautiful woman with the locks running through the forest called Oya. See, the courage to change must marry the wind which represents change. So the courage to change marries change. But in the African story and the metaphor, it says that Oya practiced polyandry because she marries another man. She marries the man called Ogun, the god of war, the god of iron. But that's a symbol, that's a metaphor. What does it mean? The god of war, the god of iron. If you want to get iron or steel, you take a piece of rock, you put it in the fire, and you burn out the impurities and do what? Cause transformation to take place. So the courage to change, which is Shango, marries change in process, which is Oya, who then marries transformation as a result of change, which is Ogun. Now that's African theology in the form of what we call Orishas. Those are 3 Orishas that symbolize schools of thought that we can learn and practice in terms of our behavior and change our condition by changing ourselves back to an African self. Y'all understand that? The sister said I was going to give you a lesson. Y'all act like that ain't exciting enough. I don't dance much. My knees hurt now. So I can't dance like that. But I can tell you some things. Simple things if you want to be free. Simple things. The reason we do ritual is to teach ideas. That's all. When we dance, we create drama. What does drama do? Teach a set of ideas and principles. And so these ideas and principles that's carried out in any drama has to do with how you develop as a human being in terms of how you understand stability, organizing family, organizing community. And I know there's some stuff that they ain't going to speak on too much, but let me tell you a little secret about Africa. You can only build a family with the opposite sex. Believe it or not. You can only build a family with the opposite sex. That don't mean you have bad thoughts or ideas about those who don't understand that fully. It means that you say you're in the culture need to understand that fully. You need to understand when in ancient Kemet, we came up with Osiris, Isis, and Horus, we were simply talking about the family. It takes a male and a female to produce the offspring that will continue the life flow of males and females. That's all we were saying. Now they confused it and came up with Jesus and Mary, or Jesus and God and the Holy Ghost. They even left Sister Mary out completely. But without Mary, ain't nothing happening. You know? We got to have that. what we were telling ourselves was that the symbol of God, the best symbol the Africans came up with of God, was the symbol of the man, woman, and child. That the family is the symbol of God. It was not supposed to be an object of worship of the offspring. It was to give you the best symbol possible. Because the only person on this earth that can carry out the creation process like we say God did is a woman, a black woman. You're the first one to do it. If somebody show me a human being that didn't come through the womb of a black woman or a woman, because at the end of the day, all women were black until we had some ecological catastrophes which has caused us a bit of a problem that we need to work out by learning about history. You know, because there's only one race. And the African is the genesis of that race. And then we have to deal with the rest of the mutations in the way we must deal with them by understanding that if you mutate genetically, then maybe you're going to have a problem in terms of spiritual mutation and cultural mutation and intellectual mutation. And then we see the trouble that we're in. Now, I don't mean to go hard like that, but the truth is the only thing going to set our butts free. Otherwise, we're going to wait till next year. We're going to go right back out into our slave rituals. And then next year, at the same time, we're going to come back and pretend we're free. So if we're really talking about listening to Garvey, because Garvey was free. He freed himself. He was a free living being. He knew he was God having a human experience. He explained it to you. But we didn't get it then. So he keeps coming back in the spirit. Every generation, we've got these young people who are rising up, trying to tell the same story that Garvey tried to tell us. That freedom is not about owning things, because some of us are very wealthy. We have very wealthy black people in this world. Some of us work at the top of all of the major governments and corporations in the world. Matter of fact, if you remove the blacks from the corporations in America, you wouldn't have any corporations. But yet, they do not operate in the interest of the black people in America. Because they're not in the consciousness of Africa. They're in the consciousness of Europe. And since you got to tell me when I got that 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes, so I know. But African spirituality is about you understanding something as simple as love. You think you know what love is. But we're still, for the most part, confusing attraction with love. You know? We think if somebody looks so fine and make you feel so fine and you think they're so fine that you're in love. So you get attracted and then you get attached, then it becomes habit. And you never even stop to try to figure out what love is. But let me tell you what love is. Love is simple. If you learn to recognize the divine in you, if you can love the God in you, you'll recognize the God in the person who loved the God in himself. And it is the God in you that loves the God in them. That's love. And that love don't confuse its gender responsibilities. Only the truth will set you free. If you're not interested in freedom, stop playing it. If you're really interested in freedom, it's really simple. It's really simple. Everybody in this room contains everything you say God contains, because everything you know about God comes from the mind of a man and a woman. And you cannot imagine anything greater than your own possibilities. So you need to think about that. You cannot imagine anything greater than your own possibilities. And everything you know about every divine being that was ever talked about in any book and any time came from the minds of men and women. The thing is, some of those men and women were extraordinarily wise and exceedingly great. And we need to listen to the lessons that they left for us. So that when we go into Africa, into a village, you find that when they say family, they may not mean what you and I mean. You know? As a matter of fact, if I take the African language of Ghana, they don't even have a word for family. They have a word called abusia, but that don't really mean family. That means the line of the mother, the matrilineal line that lives in a particular house or community. But it doesn't mean the family by marriage or blood. And they have another word which means like household, fia, But that word don't really mean family because people can be in that household that don't have no blood relationship to you. What they mean by family is, do you understand the essence of the divine that is you? And can you recognize the essence of the divine that is me? And in doing so, we become one.
Yes, yes.
Now, in Cuba, they have a tradition they call Lucumi. And people say Lucumi is a religion of the Yorubas. But really, the word Lucumi simply means I recognize the essence of the divine in you as being the same as the essence of the divine in me. And so that term developed during the slave process when we were snatched away from home and we saw our people who had our same culture and we said, Lucumi, you're mine, you're me, and I'm yours. And so that tradition was kept. Those who understood themselves to be in a certain tradition and thought of understanding bond together with a certain set of rituals they remembered from home to keep them in touch with those certain sets of principles that tell them what their relationship to the rest of nature and the cosmology is. Because that's what religion should be. Religion is really a tool of spirituality. It is not an alternative to spirituality. It is a tool of spirituality. You see? Except we've accepted now as an alternative to spirituality. Now, if people talking about what I do, and I was raised by a root woman who you call an Obia woman down here, and my grandmother who raised me was the sweetest thing that was ever on the planet Earth. And yet, there are those who would want me to think of Mama as evil and wrong and negative. Now, how could I think of my Mama as that? Because we don't understand. If we want our next generation to be free, we have to be willing to sacrifice the white man that is our mind. Let me tell you that again, because that was a nice little line. If we want our next generation to be free, those of us who are mothers and fathers, we must be willing to sacrifice the white man, which is our mind. So I went to school and I was an A student. I went to college and I graduated to the top of my class. You didn't go to an African school. You didn't go to an African college. So whose knowledge did you master? You mastered the knowledge that has been oppressing you for 400 years. And now you have become your best oppressor, even when you think you're trying to be free. And so that's why it's important we back up a little bit and start learning some basic stuff. But I'm going to even give you a book. A good teacher should not go without getting a book. And it's a book by John Mbidi. Mbidi is a brother from Kenya, and he wrote 2 books. One is an Introduction to African Religion, and the second is Introduction to African Religion and Philosophy. We should all read those books as a primer to recentering our mind. And then there's the third book by a man named Dr. Wade Nobles, who's also a Yoruba priest and a psychiatrist in America. And his book is called The Island of Meme. The Island of Meme. And what he's doing, he's studying the Haitian Revolution. And he's looking at what occurred in Haiti spiritually. And he's making that the prototypical behavior on how all Africans whose oppression have in terms of our response. And what he's saying is that meme is the concepts, ideas, and principles that form the minds that we create to carry out the things we want to do. And he said the problem with us is that our meme is European. And we need to create an African meme to form the concept, ideas, and principles that guide our actions. And when we do that, we begin to construct societies of freedom. It means that we'll walk through Ocherias tomorrow and say to all those stores, that's what I'm coming right on home with it. We say to all of those stores that we don't own, that we spend all this money in, buying things that most times we don't even need, or we can get in some other way. He said, we're not coming in. So we don't come for a month, they close store, sell you everything cheap, and you open your own store. But when will you get the courage to do that? When we don't even have the courage to think we can believe in the same God. We call ourselves black, but we don't really believe black is black. Because black is not a skin color, by the way. That was never what our ancestors meant. Black is a way of knowing reality. black is our culture. Because even in ancient Egypt, we had the blackest black to the lightest tan and beige. We didn't just start getting tan and beige when we met the white man. That's a myth that the white man put on us to imply his dominance and got us confused with it. Study your history. Your history is simply the way of life of your mother and your fathers. Study your history. Your history is not what the murderer did, because that's what we do now. We study the murderer's history. Your history is what is the response and the thought of the one who is being murdered. Now, if you don't know that, you're in serious trouble. So that brings us to a conclusion. Remember, African spirituality is your reality. You cannot provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security for yourself if you don't control economic politics and culture. And you can't control economic politics and culture if you're refusing to participate in all of those institutions that provide it. It's that simple. Either you're going to be on the side complaining about institutions that's oppressing you, or take that shit over and you run it yourself. And that's what revolution is about. Because your God, having a human experience, called you. If you find another one, I will leave my number with sister. If anybody in Jamaica find another God than the one I just described, I will come back to Jamaica the next day and worship at his feet for eternity. Because you ain't gonna find one. You ain't gonna find one. And when you start looking at what I'm saying, it'll make sense. It won't seem so far out. It won't even seem so trivial. And if you study your ancestors, you see that it made sense for them. And if you listen to Garvey, he's saying the same thing I'm saying. He said it a little differently. But if you want to be free, an African cannot be free to be a Negro. An African cannot be free to be a rich colored man. An African cannot be free to be a well-to-do middle class. You will only be free when you become African again. And you can only become African again when you know that the thing you call God and the thing you call you is the same thing, just having varied experience. So I'll make it simple in the last sentence. Each of us is an expression of an aspect of the divine essence having our peculiar experience. And the divine essence is every and all things at once included.